Today we will talk about two powerful techniques that will lead you to a yes answer. We will discuss the foot in the door technique and the door in the face technique, also known as rejection and withdrawal. The foot in the door technique involves obtaining yes responses by starting with small requests, paving the way for larger requests. On the other hand, the door in the face technique begins with a larger request that is likely to be rejected, creating a sense of guilt and making the subsequent smaller request appear more acceptable for the person to agree to. The tactic of starting with a small request in order to get a larger request accepted, the foot in the door technique. Many companies also use this approach. The salesperson is to start small and get big sales. Any small sale will work because the goal is to gain loyalty, not profit. It is thought that bigger and more purchases will come naturally because of loyalty. An article in American Salesman magazine captures the essence of the issue. The general idea is to start with a small order to pave the way for full distribution. Look at it this way. If someone signs an order to buy your product, even if the profits do not compensate for the time or phone calls, that person is no longer a prospect but a customer. Green, 1965, Peter 14. Social scientists realized the impact of this technique in 1966, when psychologists Jonathan Friedman and Scott Fraser produced some very interesting data. They published the results of an experiment in which a researcher, posing as a volunteer worker, went door to door in a California neighborhood and made unreasonable demands of homeowners. The homeowners were asked to allow a billboard to be placed in their front yard. To see what this sign would look like, they were shown a photo of a very nice house with a huge sign saying, "Drive carefully," in very bad writing in front of it. This request was predictably and understandably rejected by the vast majority of residents, with only 17% agreeing. Another select group, 76%, allowed the use of their front yard. This unexpected obedience is due to an incident that happened 2 weeks ago. They made a commitment to the safety of the drivers. Another volunteer visited their house and asked them to put up a small 2-cm sign, "Be a careful driver." It was such a trivial request that almost everyone agreed, but the consequences were huge. Because they had so innocently obeyed the small request to drive carefully a few weeks earlier, these homeowners agreed to another, much larger request. Friedman and Fraser didn't stop there. They tried a different procedure on another group of homeowners. People were first asked to sign a "Let's Beautify California" petition. After waiting 2 weeks, Friedman and Fraser sent a new volunteer to the same homes and asked them to allow a "Drive Carefully" sign to be posted in their yards. In some ways, the homeowners' responses were the most surprising that emerged from the research. Half of them allowed the "Drive Carefully" sign to be placed, even though the commitment they had made a few weeks earlier had nothing to do with driving and everything to do with a completely different public service, the beautification of the state. The signing of the petition had changed the way these people saw themselves. They now saw themselves as public servants working on civic principles. When 2 weeks later they were asked to take up another public position, they agreed to do so in order to be consistent with the new image they had created for themselves. Briefly, establish a connection with a small request and then leverage that connection for the main request. Let's move on to the other technique. This is an easy technique and it is called the rejection and attraction technique, or the door in the face technique. Suppose you want me to accept a demand. One way to increase the chances of getting me to obey is to present a bigger demand that I refuse. Then, after I refuse, you present the smaller demand that you actually wanted all along. Assuming that you have successfully structured your demand, I will be more inclined to see the second demand as a concession to me, as a concession I have to make, and I will obey the second demand. In 1975, Cialdini, Vincent, Lewis, Catalan, Wheeler, and Darby conducted an experiment. Disguised as representatives of the City Youth Counseling Program, they asked college students walking on campus if they would like to accompany juvenile inmates on a day trip to the zoo. Being in charge of an unspecified group of juvenile inmates in a public place for no pay is not something these young people are particularly enthusiastic about. As expected, the vast majority, 83%, reject the offer. However, when asked the same question with a slight difference, another group of university students had different results. Before asking them to chaperone a trip to the zoo for free, they ask them for a bigger favor. They are asked to counsel juvenile inmates for 2 hours a week for at least 2 years. After the students refuse this request, and they all do, they are asked for a smaller favor to chaperone a trip to the zoo. When they decline the initial request and offer the zoo trip, the success rate increases dramatically. 3 times more students approached in this way volunteer to be chaperones on the zoo trip. You can be sure that any technique that achieves triple success will be used in other contexts. For example, labor delegates often use the tactic of making extreme demands that they did not expect to get, and then withdrawing the demand and extracting major concessions from the other side. From this, we can conclude that the bigger the initial demand, the more this procedure will work because it creates more room for concessions to be made. But this is true up to a point. Schwarzwald, Raz and Zwiebel, in a 1979 study on the door-in-the-face technique, showed that this technique backfired when the initial demand was unreasonably extreme. In such cases, it is thought that the person making the extreme initial demand is not bargaining in good faith. Withdrawal from the unrealistic initial demand is not seen as a sincere concession and therefore is not reciprocated. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to like and subscribe.